From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away.
What is it with Jesus and fig trees? Only a few chapters before this one, and in a video short you can watch as part of this series, Jesus curses a fig tree and it withers, like instantaneously. Now, not surprisingly, that's one of those passages that everyone wants to analyse. Why did Jesus do that? What did it symbolise? Isn't it just a bit weird? Which means when we arrive just 3 chapters later at another fig tree moment, we might be forgiven that our minds are already doing overtime, trying to work out what's going on and how it links to the previous text on fig trees. Well, before we start asking those questions, let's read the text again. And then let's start not with the text itself, but its context.
From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away.
I don't think I need to tell you that we're in the middle of a series about judgment. Even if I look at the titles of our video series, the one before this is called Signs of the End of the Age, and the one after it is called Watchfulness. If ever there was a reminder, church family, that context matters when we look at a passage in the Bible, this is it. These words of Jesus to his disciples that we've just read form just a small part of a much bigger conversation. Jesus has been sharing with his followers about the destruction of Jerusalem, centred on the focal point of the temple. He prophesies the temple being destroyed, speaks of false teachers, wars and rumours of wars, famine and earthquakes, what he describes as the beginning of the birth pangs. Then he's on to the persecution that his followers should expect, how people will pretend to be the Messiah, and then ultimately how this will all lead to his return. The language is powerful. And whilst it's focused on the temple, the place that had come to symbolise all that was wrong with Israel at the time, there's no doubt that we see in these words a nod back to the prophecies in the Old Testament book of Daniel, but also a heads up for what's coming in the book of Revelation. So, all these things that are going to happen, that's the setup to these verses about the fig trees. And what comes after is no less powerful. Under the banner of the heading Watchfulness, it begins with the words, "But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father." This fig tree sandwich should surely tell us something. What Jesus says seems to make sense in this context. Jesus says the putting forth of leaves is an indication of summer. Its basic meaning is clear. When one sees the green buds of the fig tree form and begin to sprout leaves, one knows that summer is on its way. In the same way, when one begins to see all the things that Jesus has described, they'll know that the destruction of the temple is near. It's as simple as that. So, what about Jesus' previous comments and actions directed at the fig tree? Well, it appears that although the last mention and action towards fig trees was only a few chapters ago, and in a chronological sense perhaps only a few hours or days, the two are not necessarily linked. The fig tree was, well, it was simply something that people could relate to. It was the most prominent deciduous tree in Palestine, and one whose summer fruiting was eagerly awaited. There's nothing deep, Nothing cryptic about it, just Jesus giving the people something they could understand, something they could relate to. So that's sorted. But what then should we make of these words? This generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Again, I don't think we need to overanalyze, because all of the references here are to the destruction of the temple, which did take place only some 40 years later, while many of Jesus's contemporaries may well still have been alive. So we see its accuracy, and we see that Jesus was spot on. And the final statement, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away, that too is straightforward. Jesus is simply saying it is more conceivable for the impossible to happen, for heaven and earth to pass away, than it is to think that my words, this promise, would pass away. For once, there's no deeper meaning, no strange actions, just Jesus making sure his followers know what's coming. I wonder if they were ready. Fig roll, anyone?